But that the greater the education, the more likely to believe in flying saucers. But that the greater the education, the more likely to believe in flying saucers. That comes as a real shocker.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will be...
Eisenhower's 1954 Meeting with Extraterrestrials. By Michael E. Sala, Ph.D. February 12, 2004 from Exabolitics website. Introduction 1. On the night and early hours of February 20 to 21, 1954, while on a vacation to Palm Springs, California, President Dwight Eisenhower went missing and allegedly was taken to Edwards Air Force Base for a secret meeting. When he showed up the next morning at a church service in Los Angeles, reporters were told that he had to have emergency dental treatment the previous evening and had visited a local dentist. The dentist later appeared at a function that evening and presented as the dentist who had treated Eisenhower. The missing night and morning has subsequently fueled rumors that Eisenhower was using the alleged dentist visit as a cover story for an extraordinary event. Circumstantial evidence supporting Eisenhower's first contact meeting with extraterrestrials. There is circumstantial and testimonial evidence supporting Eisenhower's meeting with extraterrestrials and the start of a series of meetings that culminated in the signing of a treaty with a different group of extraterrestrials. The most intriguing are circumstances surrounding Eisenhower's alleged winter vacation to Palm Springs, California, from February 17 to 24, 1954. Firstly, the vacation for the president, which was announced rather suddenly and came less than a week after Eisenhower's quail shooting vacation in Georgia. According to UFO researcher William Moore, all this was quite unusual and suggested that there was more to the one-week visit to Palm Springs than a simple holiday. Second, on the Saturday night of February 20, President Eisenhower did go missing, fueling press speculation that he had taken ill or even died. In a hastily convened press conference, Eisenhower's press secretary announced that Eisenhower had lost a tooth cap while eating fried chicken and had to be rushed to a local dentist. The local dentist was introduced at an official function on Sunday, February 21, as the dentist who had treated the president.
Moore's investigation of the incident concluded that the dentist's visit was being used as a cover story for Eisenhower's true whereabouts. Consequently, Eisenhower was missing for an entire evening and could easily have been taken from Palm Springs to the nearby Muroc airfield, later renamed Edwards. Edwards Air Force Base. The unscheduled nature of the president's vacation, the missing president and the dentist cover story provide circumstantial evidence that the true purpose of his Palm Springs vacation was for him to attend an event whose importance was such that it could not be disclosed to the general public. A meeting with extraterrestrials may well have been the true purpose of his visit. Gerald Light's letter that Eisenhower met with extraterrestrials. The first public source alleging a meeting with extraterrestrials was Gerald Light, who in a letter dated April 16, 1954 to Meade Lane, the then director of Borderlands Sciences Research Associates Now Foundation, claimed he was part of a delegation of community leaders to an alleged meeting with extraterrestrials at Edwards Air Force Base. Light described the circumstances of the meeting as follows: "My dear friends, I have just returned from Newark Edwards Air Force Base. The report is true, devastatingly true. I made the journey in company with Franklin Allen of the Hearst Papers and Edwin Norris of Brookings Institute, Truman's erstwhile financial advisor, and Bishop McIntyre of LA Confidential. Names for the present, please. When we were allowed to enter the restricted section after about 6 hours in which we were checked on every possible item, event, incident and aspect of our personal and public lives, I had the distinct feeling that the world had come to an end with fantastic realism. For I have never seen so many human beings in a state of complete collapse and confusion, as they realized that their own world had indeed ended with such finality as to beggar description. The reality of the other plane air forms is now and forever removed from the realms of speculation and made a rather painful part of the consciousness of every responsible scientific and political group. During my 2 days visit I saw 5 separate and distinct types of aircraft being studied and handled by our Air Force officials, with the assistance and permission of the Etherians. I have no words to express my reactions. Of course no such formal announcement was made, and Light's supposed meeting has either been the best-kept secret of the 20th century or the fabrication of an elderly mystic known for out-of-body experiences. The events Light describes in his meeting in terms of the panic and confusion of many of those present, the emotional impact of the alleged landing, and the tremendous difference of opinion on what to do in terms of telling the public and responding to the extraterrestrial visitors, are plausible descriptions of what may have occurred. Indeed, the psychological and emotional impact Light describes for senior national security leaders at the meeting is consistent with what could be expected for such a life-changing event. A further way of determining Light's claim is to investigate the figures he named along with himself as part of the community delegation, and whether they could have been plausible candidates for such a meeting. Another testimony: Sergeant Suggs recounted his father's experiences from the meeting in a 1991 interview with a prominent UFO researcher. Charlie's father, Navy Commander Charles Suggs, accompanied President Ike along with others on February 20. They met and spoke with 2 white-haired Nordics that had pale blue eyes and colorless lips. The spokesman stood a number of feet away from Ike and would not let him approach any closer. Another testimony: Sergeant Suggs recounted his father's experiences from the meeting in a 1991 interview with a prominent UFO researcher. Charlie's father, Navy Commander Charles Suggs, accompanied President Ike along with others on February 20. A second Nordic stood on the extended ramp of a biconvex saucer that stood on tripod landing gear on the landing strip. According to Charlie, there were 58 hustlers on the field even though the first one did not fly officially till 1956. These visitors said they came from another solar system. They posed detailed questions about our nuclear tests. John Lear is a former Lockheed L-1011 captain who flew over 150 test aircraft and held 18 world speed records, and during the late 1960s, 1970s and early 1980s was a contract pilot for the CIA. Lear developed a close relationship with CIA Director DCI William Colby, who was in charge of covert operations in Vietnam before becoming DCI. According to Lear, there had indeed been a warning from another race prior to an agreement being eventually signed, and he claimed they visited Mork/Edward and the following occurred. In 1954, President Eisenhower met with the representative of another alien species at Mork Test Center, which is now called Edwards Air Force Base. This alien suggested that they could help us get rid of the Greys, but Eisenhower turned down their offer because they offered no technology. In Dean's 27-year distinguished military career, he served at the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, where he witnessed these documents while serving under the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe. Dean claimed, the group at the time, there were just 4 that they knew of for certain, and the Greys were one of those groups. There was a group that looked exactly like we do. There was a human group that looked so much like us that really drove the admirals and the generals crazy, because they determined that these people, and they had seen them repeatedly, they had had contact with them, there had been abductions, there had been contacts to other groups. There was a very large group, I say large, they were 6-8 maybe sometimes 9 feet tall, and they were humanoid, but they were very pale, very white, didn't have any hair on their bodies at all. And then there was another group that had sort of a reptilian quality to them. We had encountered them. Military people and police officers all over the world have run into these guys. They had vertical pupils in their eyes, and their skin seemed to have a quality very much like what you find on the stomach of a lizard. So those were the 4 they knew of in 1964. 14. There is some discrepancy in the testimonials as to which Air Force base the spurned extraterrestrials met with President Eisenhower and/or Eisenhower administration officials. Cooper claims this occurred at Homestead Air Force Base in Florida, and not Edwards. 15. On the other hand, Lear and Suggs suggested occurred at Edwards. In his letter, Gerald Light pointed to intense disagreement amongst Eisenhower officials in responding to the extraterrestrials at the Edwards AFB meeting. Such intense disagreement may predictably have occurred if national security officials were responding to an extraterrestrial request to abandon the pursuit of weapons technologies. Given the intensity of the Cold War, the national security officials present may well have decided it was more prudent to seek better terms before agreeing to the extraterrestrials' request. Light's testimony implies that the meeting at Edwards did not result in an agreement, but instead resulted in intense disagreement between Eisenhower officials. Consequently, I will conclude that the Lear and Suggs version is more accurate, and that the first contact meeting occurred at Edwards Air Force Base on February 20 to 21, 1954. subsequent 1954 agreement with extraterrestrials. According to the testimonies examined so far, the February 20th to 21st, 1954 meeting was not successful, and the extraterrestrials were spurned due to their refusal to enter into technology exchanges and insistence on nuclear disarmament by the U.S. and presumably other major world powers. Cooper describes the circumstances of a subsequent agreement that was reached after the failure of the first meeting. While Cooper has a different version of dates and times for the 1954 meetings, he agrees that there were two sets of meetings involving different extraterrestrials meeting with President Eisenhower and / Eisenhower administration officials.
Project Sigma intercepted alien communications, and when the objects reached the Earth, they took up a very high orbit around the equator. There were several huge ships, and their actual intent was unknown. Project Sigma and a new Project Plato, through radio communications using the computer binary language, which the aliens understand very well, they're very mathematical minded, was able to arrange a landing that eventually resulted in face-to-face contact with alien beings from another planet. Project Plato was tasked with establishing diplomatic relations with this race of space aliens. But in the meantime, something else happened. In the meantime, a race of human-looking aliens contacted the United States government. Where this happened, I do not know. I wish that I did. This alien group warned us against the aliens that were orbiting the equator and offered to help us with our spiritual development. They demanded that we dismantle and destroy our nuclear weapons as the major condition. They refused to exchange technology, citing that we were spiritually unable to handle the technology which we then possessed, and has not that been true throughout our history? They believed that we would use any new technology to destroy each other, as we always have. This race stated that we were on a path of self-destruction, and we must stop killing each other, stop polluting the earth, stop raping the earth's natural resources, and learn to live in harmony with each other and with nature. These terms were met with extreme suspicion, especially the major condition of nuclear armament, disarmament, and I have to say that I could not blame them in the face of so many uncertainties and so many alien surprises staring them directly in the face. It was believed that meeting that condition would leave us helpless in the face of an obvious alien threat. We also had nothing in history to help with the decision. Nuclear disarmament was not considered to be within the best interest of the United States, and the overtures were rejected. Later in 1954, the race of large-nosed gray aliens which had been orbiting the Earth landed at Holloman Air Force Base. It happened in 1954, ladies and gentlemen. If you take everything that Bob Ebenegger has ever said and subtract 10 years from it, you will be right on the money. A basic agreement was reached. An alien named Krill was left as a pledge that they would return and formalize the agreement. In effect, he was a hostage. This race identified themselves as originating from a planet around a red star in the constellation of Orion, which we call Betelgeuse. I believe that that's a lie. They lie a lot, and they deceive a lot, and it is evident through every action that they've ever done with us. The truth is, ladies and gentlemen, these creatures might be from Mars, really. They claim that they are from a planet which revolves around the red star, which we call Betelgeuse. They stated that their planet was dying and that at some unknown future time they would no longer be able to survive there. This led to a second landing at Edwards Air Force Base. The historical event had been planned in advance, and details of the treaty had already been agreed upon. Eisenhower arranged to be in Palm Springs on vacation. On the appointed day, the president was spirited away to the base, and the excuse was given to the press that he was visiting the dentist for a toothache. President Eisenhower met with the aliens, and a formal treaty between the alien nation and the United States of America was signed. We then received our first alien ambassador from outer space. His name and title, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's absolutely true. His name and title was His Omnipotent Highness Krill, pronounced Krill, spelled K-R-L-L-L or C-R-L-L-L. In the American tradition of disdain for royal titles, he was secretly called Original Hostage Krill, or O-H Krill, so that Americans would not have to say, Your Omnipotent Highness. You should know that the alien flag is known as the trilateral insignia. It looks like a TP with two circles on either side of the V and one pole running straight down the middle. It is displayed on their craft and worn on their chest on their uniforms. Both of these landings in the second meeting were filmed, and the film exists today. Where it exists, I do not know, but I do know that it exists. The treaty stated, the aliens would not interfere in our affairs, and we would not interfere in theirs. We were particularly interested that they do not interfere with anything that would affect our future, which has been violated. We would keep their presence on Earth a secret. They would furnish us with advanced technology and would help us in our technological development. They would not make any treaty with any other Earth nation. They could abduct humans on a limited and periodic basis for the purpose of medical examination and monitoring of our development, with the stipulation that the humans would not be harmed, would be returned to their point of abduction, that the humans would have no memory of the event, and that the alien nation would furnish MJ-12 with a list of all human contacts and abductees on a regularly scheduled basis. And this is not being done. It was agreed that each nation would receive the ambassador of the other for as long as the treaty remained in force. It was further agreed that the alien nation and the United States would exchange 16 personnel each to the other with the purpose of learning each of the other. The alien guests would remain on Earth, and the human guests would travel to the alien point of origin for a specified period of time, then return, at which point a reverse exchange would be made. I have no knowledge whatsoever of what happened to those original 16 humans who left the Earth with the aliens. It was also agreed that bases would be constructed underground for the use of the alien nation, and that 2 bases would be constructed for the joint use of the alien nation and the United States government. The base at Dulce is one. The base at S4 in the area known as Area 51 or Dreamland is the second. Exchange of technology would take place in the jointly occupied bases. These alien bases would be constructed under Indian reservations in the 4 corners of Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona, and one would be constructed in Nevada in the area known as S4, located approximately 7 miles south of the western border of Area 51, otherwise known as Dreamland. All alien areas are under complete control of the Naval Department, and all personnel who work in these complexes receive their checks from the Navy. Construction of the bases began immediately, but progress was slow until large amounts of money were made available in 1957, and in the meantime work continued on the Yellow Book with the information derived from the guests.
哎，你低点，低点，被发现了！快些！哎，天哪，真的上！
Some outside universal threat. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?